Hi everyone, welcome back to this episode 3 of this introduction to our programming tutorial series. In today's episode, we'll be talking about the basic syntax and also the data types. In terms of the scope that we'll be covering, we'll be learning how to get started with the basic syntax, and then we'll move on with the data types. So first off, let's understand how we can actually assign data to specific variables. So if you have code with other programming language like Python and JavaScript, you know that if you want to actually assign data to a specific variable, you actually use the equal symbol over here. For R itself is a little bit special. We can actually use this arrow symbol, so which is a dash and then more equal for the left hand assignment, and then for the right hand assignment is a less than symbol and then a dash, or you can actually use an equal sign. So let's get into an example. So what do I mean by left hand assignment or right hand assignment? So let's say if you want to do a left hand assignment, most of the time we actually do a left hand assignment. We actually assign, let's say for over here, we assign A with the number 1, right? So if you look into A, we have number 1. So how do we actually do a right hand assignment for this? We can just switch the characters. So over here we can do 1, and then we do a right hand, do a dash, right hand A. So A will also be number 1, right? So we seldom actually use a right hand assignment. We always use a left hand assignment. And then if you actually want to assign it with using the equal sign, it's fine as well. But most of the time we actually use this arrow symbol. So A equals to 1 will also create the assignment of 1 to the variable A, right? So if you look into your RStudio, over here we're actually going to do all the examples on the console. And then this one itself is a script. So the script, how do you actually differentiate between these two is that over here you can see a console, which is this environment, and then for script usually you have a run button over here. So if we recap what we did in the previous tutorial, for script wise, we won't see immediate response when we actually type in our code. So if we click on enter, it will just move on to the second line, as opposed to over here when we actually do it on the console, we get a straight response over here. So A itself is equals to 1, and over here I have to highlight the whole thing and then I click on run in order for this to run. Right, so this is just something you have to take note when we go through the example later. So next up, let's spend some time talking about print statements. So if you go through any coding tutorials, it will actually tell you, the first thing you have to do is to print the hello world statement. We are going to do the same. So in terms of printing, it's quite straightforward. We do a print, we type in print, and then over here we put in the brackets, and then we type in hello beautiful people of the internet, and then you get printed up straight away. So print statements are quite important. So let's say if you actually want to check if whatever functions that you have applied onto a specific variable actually works, we will actually use a print statement inside the function to see if it actually works. So we often see ourselves doing print statements, but then it's important when we actually push the program, when we push the program to production, it's important that we actually get rid of the print statements. Otherwise it will actually show up at the log when we actually look through it. So this is something that you have to take note. So something you may have noticed is that when we actually do the print statement, we actually put the statement in between two quotations, right? The reason for that is because the statements are characters, right? Characters are actually words. So there are different data types that we are going to talk about later. There are characters, there are numerics, there are logicals like true, false, and NA. And then there are complex numbers. There are also raw data. So raw data are like bytes, something that a computer will actually understand. So when we actually do a print statement, for example, for a number, you actually don't have to put that number in between a quotation. So if you do a print of 1, it will actually show up as 1, so we don't have to put it as a quotation. But notice when I actually put it in between the quotations, what we see here is actually completely different from what we see on top. So what happened here when you actually put something in between a quotation is that it will be converted to a character. So let's say we do a type of. Type of is a way for us to actually find out the type of the variable that was assigned. So over here, let's say we do a type of 1 in between quotations. You see that it's actually character. But then if we actually remove the double quotation, it will be a double. So a double is a form of numeric value, and most of the time is all for R, they will actually classify any numerics as a double. So when you actually do assignment of any form of data, even for logical data like true and false, it's important that you don't put them in between quotations. Otherwise, you'll be converted to a character. And if it's a character, you can't add anything. So if I do 1 plus character, you get an error message to say there's a non-numeric argument to binary operators. This itself is a character. You can't add a character with a numeric. It just doesn't work, right? So this is something that you have to take note. So next up, we're going to talk about addition, subtraction, multiplications, division, and also remainder. So when you actually do addition, subtraction, and all these mathematical functions, it's actually quite straightforward. So you can just, for example, if I do print 1 plus 1, I just do that, and then it will show up as 2. Same applies for a number. So 1 minus 1 will be 0. And then multiplication is just using the star symbol, which is shift 8. And then we do 9, for example, it will be 1 times 9 will be 9. And then lastly, we'll be doing division, which is, let's say, 6 divided by 2 will be 3. So the next one we could talk about is remainder. So to actually identify the remainder after division, for example, let's say if we do 6 divided by 4, right? 6 divided by 4, the remainder is 2. So how do we actually identify this remainder? So we're actually going to use this symbol, which is a double percentage sign. So if we do that, we actually get a remainder of 2, right? So when do we actually see ourselves using this double percentage sign thingy? It's when we actually want to identify to see if this variable is even or odd number, right? I think some of the time when we actually do some coding problem, they will actually ask you, how do you actually prove that this variable is even or odd? So one way is to use this divisible sign. So for example, let's say if I assign a variable this to be 8, and then I assign b to be 1. Right, 8 itself is a even number, b itself is an odd number. So what I can do is I can say if, I'll talk about if else statement, conditional statement, and in a later tutorial. But this is just to prove that we can actually know if a variable is an odd or even number. So let's say a itself, if it's divisible by 2. So when divisible is something that's divisible by the number, it will actually generate a 0 remainder, right? This is something you have to take note. You can do a print. If it's a will be print even number, else print odd. So you can see that a itself is an even number because it generates a 0 remainder. But then how do we actually check that it's a odd number? We can actually do the same with b. So b is a 1 divided by 2 will generate a remainder, so we say it's an odd number. So as simple as that. And then you may have noticed that I actually use the double equal sign. So when the double equal signs means that it's actually directly equals to something that you actually want to test out. So let's say if a is equals to test, and then we want to check if it's actually exactly to that character. So if a is equals to test, right? Because it's actually, we want to see if it's actually exactly the same as this character. So if that's the case, print. Actually, we don't have to do this. Let's say if I close this, 1 second. So what we can do is we can do a, we already know A is test, so A is equal to test, which will then return a boolean that is true, right? So how do we know if it's the opposite of a double equal is not equal? So how do we actually assign a not equal? Is to use an exclamation mark equal. Let's say if it's cake, for example, which will then return true because A is not equals to cake. So not equal is an exclamation mark and an equal sign, and then equal is a double equal sign. So the reason why we don't use a single equal sign is because a single equal sign is used for assignment of variable, right? So A equals to 1 is assigning 1 to A, right? But A double equals to 1 is checking the equality to see if A is actually equals to 1, and then it returns true when it is equals to 1. So next up, we're actually going to talk about data types. So there are 5 types of data: characters, numerics, logical, and also complex and raw data, right? So for character, it's actually quite simple. As what I say, anything that's assigned between a double quotations will be a character. So let's say if I assign A to be a test, and then how do we actually check for the type, the character type? The data type of this variable is to use this type of function, and then we type in A, and then it'll tell us that it's a character, right? So next up is numerics. So numerics, there are a few types. There are integers, there are decimals, but most of them are actually belongs to this double class. This class called double in R. So for example, let's say if I do a type of 1, it will be a double. If I do a type of 1.1, it will also be a double, right? A double itself, it will always be converted as a double, regardless of whatever not numeric value it is. So next up is logical. So for logical, there are 3 types. There are true, false, and NA. So let's say if you do type of true, it's a logical, and then false, it's also logical. Same applies for NA, right? So logical values are something that you will often use in conditional statements, if and else, right? Because if and else uses the true and false in order to actually execute the following lines of code. So if something is equal to something, this one will actually returns a true or false statement, then it will execute the code. So if it's true, it will execute the code. Otherwise, it will actually it will not execute the code unless you have an else statement. Then it will actually execute that false statement. All right. So what else do we have here? So next up is a complex number. So complex number is something that we don't use that often. So for example, if I do assign it to be 1 plus 1i, so it contains this imaginary number. So we do type of A, it will be a complex number. I don't often see myself using this, but maybe unless you're doing some mathematical calculations, then you'll probably use this complex data type. So lastly is raw data type. So for raw data type, it's let's say if I want to actually convert something, let's say if I have a character, once again I'll use the test. Let's say I want to convert this character to a raw data type. So raw data type are data type that comes in bytes, right? So let's say if I'm raw is char to raw A, so you convert it into bytes. So if you actually want to convert it to integer, let's say if I do int to raw into bits, bytes, if I'm not wrong, into bytes, into bits, bytes, bits, yeah, bits, bits, yeah, let's just call it bits. Yeah, so you actually convert it into the following bits, bytes, yeah, following bytes. So I don't really see myself using this that often. Mainly the 3 are the characters, numerics, and also logical. So this is it for this video. In the next video, we'll be talking about R objects. So if you have any questions, with regards to this episode, you can actually comment down in the description below, or you can look for me on Discord and we will have a further discussion. All the course material will be in the description below. I will put it up on GitHub so you can actually have a look. And I guess this is it. So enjoy your week. Have a nice week ahead. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.